Hello, I'm Jyotika. Welcome back to my channel. This is part 2 of a lesson in which I was solving the May 2024 paper research method section for AQA psychology. So if you haven't watched the part 1 of this video already, I strongly recommend you watch it first. Otherwise this video won't make sense to you because straight off I'm going to continue from where I had left. I will link part 1 in the description box below. So in this video, I'm coming to question 1.9. I had completed up to question 1.8 in the previous video. I'm also not going to read out the scenario again. That's why it's very important for you to watch the previous video or at least have the question paper with you so that you know what the situation is about for which the question is being answered. Okay, here they've asked explain how a pilot study could be carried out to improve this study. Now, for the study that we were looking at, the situation, definitely pilot study would be very useful in many respects. Right from wanting to check on some of the ethics that we shouldn't be embarrassing or harassing the children in any way by watching them. That could be one purpose for doing a pilot study. Two, methodological concerns, of course. Let's say, for example, whatever duration we are selecting to observe the children, is that sufficient to make observations, or even to check the categories of play? Are we classifying them correctly? Is there any overlap between the categories? Or just to check whether there is clear visibility in observation, there should be no distractions around. So there are many reasons for which we might want to do a pilot study. I would suggest that for 4 marks we give only 2 reasons. As I've mentioned for previous questions also, it isn't compulsory to give 2 points, but I always think of for 4 marks, 2 points are really justified. Anything more than that tends to lose depth and lose focus. Anything less than that tends to be very less unless you're able to give it in a very detailed way. So I will be giving 2 reasons in my model answer. I would say a pilot study could help check the coding categories for any overlap, or I can say any distortion also. Right now I'm just taking overlap, and then I can give an example. As I've emphasized so much in the previous video, here my emphasis remains the same. Keep contextualizing to get full marks. For example, I think in the second situation they have mentioned about some sandpit play. I would just like to look at that again. Right, so I would give the example, for example, something like sandpit play could overlap with, say, building with wet sand. Since I know building blocks is one more category given, but just it could also be indicative of building. So say building with wet sand. The researcher might observe this in the pilot study and thereby operationalize sandpit play as strictly playing with dry sand. So this could be one reason, just to clarify the categories to be observed. And another reason could be, so I would say a pilot study could also help with, as I mentioned previously, checking the timing of observation. For example, the researcher could check whether a 10 or 15-minute session would be sufficient to observe children's play. And of course, he could extend the time or reduce it if that much is not required. I'm sorry, I have mentioned a 10 or 15, but I just looked at the situation again and they have mentioned 15. So I would say whether a 15-minute duration is sufficient to observe the children's play or more or less time is needed. So I've presented these two reasons. As I have mentioned earlier, you could give any other two reasons which you feel are more appropriate for a pilot study. The key is just naming two reasons and linking back each reason to the scenario. Now let's take a look at the next question. Okay, so now we can see the next question. There were 34-year-old children at nursery A and 24-year-old children at nursery B. The researcher used a stratified sample of 10 4-year-old children for the study. Explain how the researcher might have obtained the stratified sample of 4-year-old children from the two different nursery schools. This is very specific to stratified sampling, so we have to give 4 points in the procedure. As I've mentioned for some of the previous questions, for these type of questions, you should already have a procedure laid out in your mind, like in general, what is the process of stratified sampling, you should know that. Then step by step, you're just able to apply it to the context. Now you can see that the question is about how. That is the key. Make sure that you stay focused on the how. Don't get into the why of it. So don't explain why a stratified sample is good. Like many students will start mentioning the strengths of a stratified sample. It is representative and so on. That is not what they are looking out for here. So here we have to just give the steps. Okay. Also, as you know, in stratified sampling, a little bit of calculation is required. You must show that explicitly. You can't show it in terms of like roughly, or just saying this is something that would be done and then you don't show the actual working out. That is not allowed. You will have to show the full working as it applies to this question. Okay, I'll be able to better explain to you as I write. So I'll start writing the answer. The first step in stratified sampling is to always identify the strata, that is the groups. So we can say the researcher first identifies the subgroups or strata, we can say. In this case, if you see which are the subgroups or strata, they are the nurseries, nursery A and B. Nursery A, I would say, made up of 30 children, and nursery B made up of 20 children. Then what do we have to do for stratified sampling? We have to calculate the proportion that needs to be allocated. So next, I just like to keep on connecting with next or then. It's easier for me also to stay on track in sequence and for the examiner also to see. Next, they would calculate the proportion of students, of children, who need to be selected. The population comprises, like this is continuation of the same step only where I'm showing the working. The population comprises of 50 children, out of which 30 are from nursery A. And then I'll just show the proportion calculation. I can take it as a proportion literally like 0.6, or I can take it as a percentage. I'll show it as a proportion for now, though I know some students prefer percentage, but this is how I'll put it. 30 divided by 50 is equal to 0.6. You can use a calculator. I did not find it necessary here, but if you're more comfortable or you just like to cross-check, you're allowed to use a simple calculator. And 20 are from nursery B. 20 out of 50, that is so 0.4. For a sample of 10, right? The researcher wants a sample of 10. So the researcher would need to select. Now I'm just going to show how the calculation is done for the final number. So how we convert the proportion into the numbers for the sample. 0.6 into 10. 6 children from nursery A and 0.4 into 10. 4 children from nursery B. Now many students will just stop at this point and they don't explain further. That's an issue. If you just write till here, at the most you'll get 2 marks. This is not enough because we've just suggested how the researcher is calculating the numbers needed. But then how they're actually selecting these many children is something we have not explained till now. That's the key part. So we need to indicate some sort of random sampling. Because after all, stratified sampling is also stratified random sampling. So we can say then the researcher will use a lottery method such as drawing chits from a bowl comprising of all names of children from nurseries A and B respectively, to finalize on 6 and 4 children respectively. So this is how I will explain stratified sampling. The key thing, like I said, is to indicate exactly how selection is being done. Again, there you have to be careful not to just say random selection will be done. In practice, what is random selection? Lottery method, drawing chits, or alternatively using a random number generator. You need to indicate that as well. Okay, so 2 things you have to be careful about in this question. One is showing the calculations, exactly how the proportions are being calculated and translated to numbers. And secondly, to indicate how the actual selection is being done. Both are equally important. Let's look at the next part of the question. The researcher calculated averages for the time in minutes spent in the sandpit for each age group. The results are shown in the table below. The title of the table is Average Time in Minutes Spent in the Sandpit for the 2 age groups. So we can see the mean is 11 for 2-year-olds, 6 for 4-year-olds. Median is 12 for 2-year-olds, 6 for 4-year-olds, and mode is 15 for 2-year-olds and 6 for 4-year-olds. What they want us to do is identify the type of distribution shown in the data for each group, and in each case we have to justify the answer. So we have to indicate for 2-year and 4-year-olds. As I've been doing in part 1, I've already told you I will be explaining to you how to think about the questions also. So when it comes to distribution type of questions, for students it might be difficult to think about it without actually drawing a rough graph. So definitely you can take your pencil in the paper and just draw a rough graph so that you know exactly which skew it is. I hope from the question type of distribution you've already understood you're supposed to indicate whether it is normal distribution or it is some sort of skewed distribution. Okay, now actually skews are very easy to draw and identify as long as you don't confuse between negative and positive skew. So I'll just show you quickly how you can do that. Again, it's beyond the scope of this video, I know, to explain to you certain things, like some of you might have felt stratified sampling calculation went fast, or you might feel that this is a quick explanation. But if you want me to explain in more details, I can make dedicated videos. It takes some more time to explain. So you can leave a comment in the description box. So in the comments box below. Okay, if we look at the first distribution, we see the mean for 2-year-olds is 11, for median for them is 12, and mode is 15. Now if I'm to represent this in a distribution, I know firstly it's not a normal distribution. That is clear, because if it were normal, all the 3 values would have been exactly identical, which is the case for 4-year-olds. So instead what I can do is, I can just think of, is it a negative or a positive skew? One problem is students firstly confuse between negative and positive skew itself. So very quick thing, again it's beyond the scope to explain more, but when it comes to skew, we are talking about tail. Where is the tail of the distribution? You can see that in the diagram which I have drawn on the left, the tail is to the left side. So this is a negative distribution, because if this is graph, x and y axis, this is going on the negative end. Left side is always negative end. So this is a negative skew. And if the tail is on this side, on the right side, right is always positive. So this is a positive skew. I just have to identify for this question, is it a positive or negative skew, which 2-year-olds are showing, because I'm sure they are not showing a normal distribution. Now in very quickly, again, just to quickly grasp, in both the distributions, the median is going to be at the center, because median is the middle value. So median is always going to be there. Mean is always going to be pulled towards the tail. So mean is going to be here in the case of the positive distribution, and in the case of the negative distribution, it's going to be here on the left. And the mode is always going to be the peak point, the highest point. So in the case of the negative skew, it is going to be here. And in case of the positive skew, it is going to be here. That means why I have drawn all this is so that we can quickly identify which type of distribution this is. Now in the first type of distribution, that is the negative one, I can clearly see that the mode is going to have the highest value because it is the rightmost. And in the positive one, I can see clearly that the mode is going to have the least value because it is on the left side. Now here I can see that it comes to, in the given table, the mean is having the least value 11, median is having a value of 12, which is in between, and mode is having the highest value, which is 15. So it is fitting into what we call a negative distribution or a negative skew. So I hope you've got at least a rough idea of how you should judge whether it is a negative or a positive skew. So in the case of 2-year-olds, we are seeing it's a negative type of distribution, negative skew. And in the case of 4 years, as I've mentioned, it is normal distribution because it is perfectly symmetrical. All the values are 6. Okay, now we've understood this is a negative skew. You can call it a left skew also. The question is how to explain it here. We can just first name the skew or just identify it. So we can say the distribution for two-year-olds is negatively skewed. And now, very importantly, they have not told us just to identify which type of distribution it is. They also want us to justify the answer. Justification means two things. Firstly, what I showed you in the diagram, putting it in words. Why we are saying it's a negative skew, which value is higher than the other. Like when it comes to mean, median, mode, what is the trend? That is what we have to explain. Secondly, it is optional, not compulsory, but we could give justification in the sense of a possible explanation why this trend might be seen. So the distribution for 2-year-olds is negatively skewed. This is because the mean is lesser than, and I could just indicate the numbers for more clarity in parenthesis. So mean 11 is lesser than the median 12, which is lesser than the mode 15. And now if I have to give a justification, this indicates, like I told you, this is optional, but it's good to practice it here even if you don't intend to write in the paper. This way of thinking could be helpful for other type of questions. This indicates that amongst 2-year-olds, some children spent much less time in the sandpit. If it was a normal distribution, it would indicate that most children are spending about equal amounts of time in the sandpit, which is the average amount. But in this case, we are seeing that the mean is lower than the median, indicating that some children are spending lesser time in the sandpit. The mode is higher, means there are quite a few children who are spending a high time, but because the mean is pulled at the lower end, it goes to indicate there are some children who are showing lesser than average time at the sandpit when it comes to 2-year-olds. If you're finding it complex, you can skip this part. For the 4-year-olds, I have to justify in a similar pattern. The distribution for 4-year-olds is normally distributed. This is because the mean, either you can say is equal to the median is equal to the mode, or you can put it this way: median and mode are exactly identical. This indicates that most 4-year-olds spend an average time in the sandpit. Okay, so this is how we can answer this question. Let's look at the next one. I wish to finish this lesson with this video. The next question is, what do the mean values in table 1 suggest about play preferences in 2-year-old and 4-year-old children? Justify your answer. Now the key thing over here is to focus on mean values. Previously they asked us about the distribution in question 2.1. Here they are asking us only about the mean value, so the comparison that we draw here has to be only with respect to the mean of each group. That means I will look at the mean for the 2-year-olds, which is 11, and for the 4-year-olds, which is 6. I will note which is greater. And what does that indicate? Means one sentence will just be indicating the group, the mean of which group is greater. That will be one sentence. Next will be explaining that possibly what that means. It just means that 2-year-olds are spending higher amount of time on a group as a whole. On an average, they're just spending more time in the sandpit compared to 4-year-olds. You might feel the answer is too simplistic, but this is a very simple question. Sometimes students get in the trap of, they feel that, the answer cannot be so simple. Then they start doubting themselves. Am I thinking of the right answer? When they've asked you such a direct question for a very specific value, like just mean values, definitely they want a very straightforward answer. So you don't need to go beyond this. Also, as I've explained to you, always look at the marks. It's 2 marks. You can't get into more reasoning than this. In this case, why 2-year-olds might want to spend more time in the sandpit than 4-year-olds? Not required for 2 marks. I know it might come to your mind that because 2-year-olds are, say, in the sensory motor stage as defined by Piaget. So that's why they want to feel the sand more, because that is their age to experiment with such things. But that's not really required. So what is required? I'll just show you that. The 2-year-olds have higher play preference for the sandpit than the 4-year-olds. This is indicated by the higher mean time, 11 minutes spent by 2-year-olds in the sandpit than the mean time, 6 minutes of the 4-year-olds. Okay, now I'm writing a sentence which I said you do not have to give. You can skip this. This is again optional, like I had given for the previous answer. If you want to mention it, you can. But if you have explained so far well, like you've written as I've written here, it's not necessary. You can get marks for just this much. This can reflect 2-year-olds greater tendency for sensory exploration at play. And then I should mention something for the 4-year-olds also. Then why they're not showing that preference? Don't they want sensory exploration? No, because they're at the stage where they might be looking out for complex or social activities. And the tendency for 4-year-olds to engage in complex social interaction at play. Think of this part that I've written as, if you're getting confused, do we have to write this in the exam or not? Think of it as, no, you do not have to write it. I'm just giving you some additional practice of, in case you have to answer more reasoning type of questions, especially if you've opted for cognition and development, this is how you can think of it. So I'm just taking the opportunity to give you something extra here. It's not required. What I've written up to 4-year-olds, that's up to this point. That is what you need to write in the paper. Okay, let's look at the next question. The researcher decided to use an unrelated t-test to analyze the raw data from the study on sandpit play. Explain 3 reasons for this choice in the context of the study. Okay, you know, very much expected question and very easy to score. You have the reasons for why different types of inferential tests are selected. So in this case, it's the unrelated t-test. All you have to do is keep on identifying one reason. Say you're identifying the number of groups. Second, just contextualize it and just specify which were the 2 groups in this study, which is why unrelated t-test is required. Then you identify another reason, again link it to the study. Third reason, link it to the study. That's all. So what you can do is a very straightforward question. Again, this is the one that you need to be prepared with. If t-test is asked, these are the reasons I'll give. If chi-squared is asked this, if Spearman's rho is asked this. So you have the points ready in your mind. Now you just keep connecting it. Also keep signposting as we always do. So 1 reason, 2 reason, 3 reasons. So it becomes easy for the examiner to read. One reason is that an independent groups design has been used. They have emphasized context of the study. So right from the beginning, we can keep linking it. Also, instead of independent groups design, if you want to use the term separate groups, that is fine. An unrelated t-test helps compare between separate groups, such as the 2-year-olds group. So here I'm naming the groups from the context, I'm contextualizing it. And the 4-year-olds group in this case. Another reason is that continuous data is collected. So you know, continuous or discrete data is one more reason for justifying any inferential test. In this case, it's continuous data. And I have to point out what is the continuous data collected here. The time spent in minutes by the children in the sandpit has been calculated, and therefore this test is appropriate. I know we don't need to keep on repeating this, so you could write with more brevity and you don't need to mention everywhere that t-test is appropriate. Finally, or one final reason is that means are being compared. So it's not proportions or frequencies that we are comparing, rather we are comparing means. So we can say means are being investigated for statistical significance of difference. That is, the mean or average time spent by each group in sandpit play is being compared. So that justifies use of unrelated t-test. So these are my 3 reasons. Generally, these are the 3 reasons. Right now, nothing else is coming to your mind. But if you have another point which is equally justifiable, definitely you can give that. Let's look at the next part. The calculated t value is 3.576, and for this study, the degrees of freedom is 18. Now they've given us an extract from the critical or tabled values of t. We can see the degrees of freedom is given on the left column and the critical values are given on the right columns as always. And they have also, to help us out, given us the decision rule. We know we don't need to memorize for this syllabus, they give it in the paper. The calculated value of t must be equal or greater than the critical value for the table for significance to be shown. Now the question here is, with reference to the critical values in table 2 above, explain whether or not there was a significant difference between the two age groups at the 5% level of significance. I hope you know how to read the T table. Again, if you want a dedicated lesson on that, you can let me know. For now, I'm going to be doing it quickly. We first need to look at the DF of our interest in the rows. We are targeting a DF of 18 because they have only mentioned that the DF is 18. And they've just mentioned that the significance level is 5%, meaning it is 0.05. So now I have to look at where 18 is intersecting with 0.05. Okay, so this is the critical value of my interest right now. The calculated value was given above. It was 3.576. The decision rule is given below and we know it anyways. The calculated value must be greater than the critical value. So in this case, the calculated value is 3.576, which is definitely greater than 2.101. So clearly here we can say that there is a significant difference between the two age groups. 1 mark for agreeing and saying yes, there is a significant difference. Another mark for justifying why we are saying that. What we have compared and all and how we have come to this decision, we just have to put that. It's a very simple answer for 2 marks. Okay, how we can put this answer is, yes, there is a significant difference between the 2-year-olds and 4-year-olds with respect to time spent at the sandpaper pit at the 5% level of significance. This is because the calculated t value of 3.576 is greater than the critical value 2.101. So I hope you're noticing how I'm specifying both the values, the calculated and critical, that I've taken into consideration at the 5% level for 18 degrees of freedom. That's all I need to write here. For the 2 sentences, I will get 2 marks. And there's a last question for this paper. Referring to the critical values in table 2, explain why the researcher is very unlikely to have made a type 1 error. So first you need to remember what a type 1 error is. Type 1 error is when we reject the null hypothesis even though it was true. So when actually there was no difference between the groups, any difference observed was only because of chance, and still we have suggested that there's a significant difference. It is applicable to the population. That's a type 1 error. So firstly, we will write down what a type 1 error is with context to this situation. Now to justify why the researcher hasn't committed it, look at the keywords in the question. Very unlikely. That's a hint that if you just use what you have written previously, 5%, that is a lenient level of significance, as we know. So it is not a very stringent level, so it doesn't make it very unlikely that the result is significant, it just makes it unlikely. Very unlikely is something a stringent level of significance can give us, meaning a 1% level of significance can give us. So that's what they're trying to hint with very unlikely. Also, when we saw the value only, I hope most of you realize it's much greater than the critical value. It's not little bit greater, it's much greater. It's 3 point something, whereas the critical value is at the lower end of 2 point something. That only by itself should give you a hint that somewhere this value is going to be significant at the stringent level also. That is at the 1% level also. But definitely when you're writing, you need to give evidence to make your point solid. And after all, it is for 3 marks. You need to look at the table again, once for your own verification and once to see what you can write down to justify. You can see on the table for 18 degrees of freedom at the 0.01. And please do not look at 0.1. Please look at 0.01 level of significance. As we are going towards the right columns, we are becoming increasingly stringent with the criterion. You can see here the critical value is 2.878 and the calculated value is even greater than 2.878. That is how we can justify that it's really unlikely that the researcher has committed a type 1 error. So what are going to be my points in the answer? Firstly, explaining what a type 1 error would mean in this context. Secondly, justifying that the calculated value is high even at the 1% level. And third, supporting it with evidence. That's how I'll get 3 marks. So let's see how to put it down in words. A type 1 error in this case would mean stating that there is a significant difference in the time spent playing in the sandpit by 2-year-olds and 4-year-olds. The researcher is very unlikely, even though I forgot to complete that, there is no such difference in the population. The researcher is very unlikely to have committed this error as the obtained t-value is significant even at the stringent alpha level of 0.01. Now I'll give the evidence, that is the calculated value of 3.576 is greater than the 0.01 level critical value of 2.878 at or for 18 TF. Okay, so that is how I can write the last answer. As I have done for the previous part, for this part also I will upload this document on my website, that is the written answers, I will upload them. You can download it as a free PDF copy and you can save it for future reference. I will link the PDF in my description box and pinned comment below, so you can download it from there. There are many other such resources, solved papers and notes on my website, and many more videos for AQA psychology on this channel itself. You can check out the AQA playlist. I will link it in the description box and comments box below. If you have any doubts about this video, anything that I have mentioned in this video, or if you want any further clarification, if you have any suggestions for future videos, please leave it in the comments box below. Please do not contact me personally for anything that I share in the videos. I do read your comments, so you can let me know there. Only if you want private tuition from me, you want private classes for your AQA psychology or Oxford AQA psychology, I teach that also. Then you can contact me on my personal details, which I'm giving below, my email ID or my WhatsApp number. So thank you for watching this video, and I'll try to return with another video solving a past paper very soon. Goodbye.